So, hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today I am bringing to you the GTX 580 Lightning from MSI, and also with my new camera, which now should capture a lot more detail and also in glorious 60 FPS if the file manages to be small enough to upload properly. So, here we have the card already disassembled because this time it wasn't the camera which was the problem, so this is take two. Audacity just stopped recording my microphone, which is cool, I guess. But you didn't really miss a lot. I just removed the heatsink. So here we have the heatsink. The IHS sticks to it because, well, of course I deleted the card. And there's more pass between those two than between the IHS and the GPU, so it sticks to the heatsink. If you take it back on, you can see this one is kind of misaligned. Make sure to align those properly, because if not, you can have not proper contact between the thermal paste if you plan to reuse the IHS. What I was saying about the heatsink is it's a very, very beefy heatsink. It's not that big actually, but it does use quite a lot of heat pipes and also fins. And the thing that makes it so powerful is just the fans, which are, you can see how thick those are, right? Yeah, should be able to see it. So these fans spin really, really fast and they get really, really loud. Not as loud as ASUS fans, but damn are they ever loud. As compared to other fans like Zotac, Gigabyte, and those are pretty silent compared to ASUS fans and also these. So yeah, this heatsink is more of a brute force approach to cooling than the heatsinks you would see today on like a 2080 Ti, which is just a giant amount of fins with 3 or 2 less powerful fans than this, which is more silent, but it is a bigger heatsink. Like, this card is dual slot, which is pretty damn impressive for a extreme overclocking card like this. So yeah. The second thing I was talking about is the base plate that was on here. So the base plate was on here like this. It was screwed in through the back and also by these screws to the I/O shield. And with these cards from MSI, you should be really, really careful with the thermal pads. As you can see, the VRM thermal pads kinda got ripped apart, and this is a mild case of this problem, because the 560 Ti 448, which I had here, uses the same thermal pads, and those look like this. So I kind of mashed these back together because, well, I don't have the right thermal pads here to replace them. And if you take a card from MSI from this time, like GTX 500, maybe 600 series time, if you take a card from MSI apart, be careful with removing base plates with thermal pads, because like you could be lucky like with this one or the VRM thermal pads on this one, and they could stay intact, or they could just get ripped apart like these here. And you might have like this. I would not advise to use these thermal pads. And I got sent a message. Nice. So yeah, I'm still using my smartphone to record. This is a new one, of course. So this is now a OnePlus 7T Pro, whereas before I used this, which is a Nokia 6.1. This is a around 150 to 200 euro phone, whereas the phone I'm using now is a 750 euro phone, which is also newer. So that's quite big of an upgrade, and I specifically chose it not entirely for the camera, but it was a main thing. So yeah, I hope those videos look a lot better now. So yeah, where was I? Thermal pads. Yeah. If the thermal pads get ripped apart, I would just advise you to replace them, and make sure you're using the right thickness, because you can apparently kill your card with using too thick thermal pads. especially for the VRAM, where you would end up bending the PCB, which could just kill the card. So yeah, make sure you have the right thickness. These look, you should always verify, but these look like 1 millimeter to me. These look like 1 mil to me. So yeah, but now we have the PCB right here, and the first thing I gotta say is, damn, that's an impressive VCore VRM. And the second thing I gotta say is, was it really that more expensive to choose a matte black PCB MSI? Because this is the only thing I don't like about this card. It is a brown glossy PCB, whereas the Asus GTX 580, a direct CO2, which wasn't even their top model, and it is inferior in basically every way to this. Yeah, that one uses a matte black PCB, so MSI, why? But I could see the reason, because on a glossy PCB like this, you can see the traces a lot better than on a matte black one, and if you were to solder to this card, which probably is expected for a card like this, you would have a much easier time with a non-matte PCB. So yeah, that might be the reason. But so now we can go to an overview of the PCB. I just took the card apart. It was basically a blind approach, so I can't tell you what these Mosfets are yet, but I'm gonna pause the video. I just got another message sent. I hope this doesn't pick up on the mic. I gotta take care of that. Gotta mute the phone. I'm gonna pause the video at some point, look up the data sheets for these Mosfets, and if I can't find them, maybe I'll find someone else who took apart a GTX 580 Lightning, and then I can tell you what this VRM exactly is. But for now, the basics that I can tell you. So of course we've got our GF110 right here, because this is a GTX 580. We have 1.5 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, which is Samsung. All the 4 Fermi cards that I had in my hands are Samsung. There is a Hynix entry in the BIOS for every Fermi card, but I have never seen a Fermi card using Hynix GDDR5. So maybe this is just by chance, or because Hynix was in much lower volume, or maybe it wasn't available at the time these cards were made. Can someone please stop? Okay, I'm gonna mute the camera now. So it's now in mute mode. Yeah, so this is what every GTX 580 has. We have 1.5 gigabytes of GDDR5 VRAM. We have our GF110, which has 512 processing cores, CUDA cores, whatever you want to call them. This is an completely unlocked Fermi core. And then we have our VRM section, which is the real star of this PCB, because just look at all those faces. Like, there are so many VCore phases, they had to put the VRM over here, because even though this is a much wider PCB than stock, it still wasn't wide enough to get all the VRMs in one line, which is what you usually see. Well, except on 2080 Ti's, those also have 2 VRMs, but these split up VCore, so you've got like one half of VCore over there, the other half of VCore over there. So yeah, and here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 phases of VCore, and I just gonna assume that these are actual 12 phases, just because. Like, these are driver ICs right here. Those could be doublers, but I don't think they are doublers, because this is an extreme overclocking card. And yeah, I don't think it would be using a doubled 6-phase. But I'm gonna look that up. Maybe if I'm wrong, I put in text saying that I'm wrong, and say you look up this part of the video where I actually check what is on this PCB. Then we've got another 3-phase VRM, which is pretty high-end, I gotta say. Like, graphics cards with 3 phases of VRM are basically this and then 2080 Ti's. Maybe also some 1080 Ti's, but 1080 Ti's stock have 2 phases, I think, whereas 2080 Ti's stock have 3 phases. So, yeah, but to be fair, 580 stock, I think, have a 1 phase. But I'm not sure about that. They have a 6-phase V-Core stock, but I'm not so sure about VMem. So, yeah. Then we also have all those capacitors over here, and then also over here, and then on the back we have even more capacitors, and then we also have 4 prod-lasers, which, as I've said in the Direct CO2 GTX 580 video, those prod-lasers over here, those are slightly different from the one we saw on the Direct CO2. Those are slightly smaller. Those capacitors are actually meant to be put... accidentally paused the video there. This fell on my spacebar and paused the sound recording. So yeah, where was I? The prod lasers. Those are meant to be put back on the back of a GPU core. So here, which is the case for the ASUS GTX 580. It's not the case here. I don't know why. Maybe because this card, like extreme overclocking cards, tend to be released last for a specific graphics card. So this might be one of the newest GTX 580 designs there is. And maybe at that time NVIDIA told every board partner to not put prod lasers at the back of the core anymore, because I think that is the case why we weren't seeing that after the 500 series. At least I think AMD specifically said it's not allowed, and I don't think that NVIDIA would allow something AMD doesn't allow, because, well, NVIDIA has a tendency to disallow everything. So yeah, that's why these prod lasers are probably there. Or there's some other engineering specific thing that I don't know yet. But having prod lasers is better than not having them. So I think this is a nice win. And yeah, those are pretty good. Those are pretty good at filtering. These are very likely VMem. I can check with a multimeter later. Yeah, so then we can get into the extreme overclocking features before I pause the video and look up the specifics for this card. So you can see those 3 white things over there. Those are voltage read points, and on the back it should say which are for which. Yes, it does. So over there you can see the first one is for GPU voltage, the second for memory voltage, and then PLL voltage. The PLL rail is a minor rail. It might be this over here. It basically powers your PCI Express interface. So it's like you have to have it to run the card, but it's not really any more interesting than that. The reason why we have a voltage read point for that is because it is related to cold bugs, cold boot bugs, and black screen issues when running graphics cards. Super cool, like liquid nitrogen and maybe dry ice. And increasing that voltage prevents those issues. The card also has a second BIOS. Like here is a BIOS switch. If you switch to the second one, it's not a it's not what you usually see as you have a silent BIOS and a performance BIOS. On here, this doesn't switch those things. It just enables the same BIOS, but with the cold boot bug fixed in software, which is, I think, pretty nice for someone who would want to run this card on super cold temperatures. And you also get the added redundancy of having dual BIOS. So if you wrongly flash one BIOS, you can just switch to the other one and recover the failed flash. So that's also very, very nice. And then we also have these switches here. These over here. These enable and disable certain things. So as you as you can see, mem V switch, GPU V switch, these probably allow user manual adjustment of these voltages, like memory and GPU voltage. PWM clock tuner probably enables you to change the PWM frequency, switching frequency from the PWM controller. Then you also have a PLL V switch, which again probably enables you to manually adjust voltage. And then you have an OCP unlocker, which just unlocks over current protection. So basically it disables it. Then we have another switch over here, which is Extreme Cooling, Extreme Cool 1 and Extreme Cool 2, which is, I think, related to the cold boot bug fix here BIOS. I don't think this card has a memory heating system. Doesn't look like it. Some cards, the Kingpin cards, sometimes come with a memory heating system because Samsung memory, I don't know if this early of Samsung memory also has this kind of behavior, but Samsung memory doesn't like to be cooled down all the way, so you have to heat it up a bit. And so you need a heating system if you run the card on liquid nitrogen, because the whole PCB is gonna freeze over. But I don't think that this would have it. Doesn't look like it to me. So yeah, those are probably other things you would read in the manual, which I don't have. When I check the Mosfets and everything else, I think maybe I find a manual for these, and then I can tell you what they are for. And yeah, then also over here we have our PWM controller. This is probably the VRM controller. Yeah, it's a UPI, both a UPI. And then one interesting thing about this PCB is that over there and also over here you have 5 milliohm shunt resistors, which is kind of strange because this card in software doesn't have power draw readouts, and it also doesn't have a power limit, because that was introduced with Kepler and the GTX 600 series. And those 5 milliohm shunts are part of this power monitoring system usually. So maybe this system was manually added to this card to enable a power draw readout, maybe with one of these switches at the back, or they are for something else, or NVIDIA just told people to put those on newer GTX 580 models because they were experimenting with it but not quite implementing it yet. That might also be the reason, because the 560 Ti 448 also has those, and it also doesn't have a power limit in software. So yeah, can't quite get behind that. And then now I'm running out of things to say actually. And yeah, so now I'm gonna pause the video. Oh no, one more thing. Over here, those are little LEDs, and those light up either red or green. And for now, half of them is green, half of them is red. But I think those are those might be indicators for how many phases of the VRM are running. I haven't specifically looked at them when running benchmarks, but I think they are there to tell you which phases, like it's a load indicator, but for the VRM, I think, because I've seen this on other cards that they have LEDs to show the user which phases of the VRM are running. So these might do that thing. they might do something else. So yeah, but now I'm gonna pause the video so I can look up what MOSFETs these are, what Pwm controller this is, and yeah, so I'm gonna be right back. So I'm back, and I just looked into the VRM of this here graphics card, and I gotta say I am pretty impressed. Now, first, both vCore and VMem use the same MOSFETs, and these are, so for the low side, which are the slightly bigger ones, these are International Rectifier IR6725s direct FETs, and the low side, well, it has a 1.7 milliohms of RDS on at 10 volts gate to source voltage, which I presume is what they run on here. And that is pretty damn impressive. 1.7 milliohms, that's like, if I remember correctly, the ASUS DirectCO2 had 3.68 milliohms. So this doesn't just have more phases than that, because the ASUS card was an 8 phase, this is a 12. This one has such low RDS on resistance on its low sides, which is where it really counts. So wow. And the continuous drain current at 25 degrees TKs is also 170 amps per MOSFET, which is also ridiculously high. So yeah, I think when you go LN2, this card is at most gonna draw 600 amps, which is not even half of what these MOSFETs are rated for per phase. So yeah, that is pretty damn impressive. And also VMem uses the same, which is just complete overkill, because GDDR5, even as old of GDDR5 as this, will never draw so much current it will max out those 3 phases. So yeah, on the high side, which are the slightly smaller ones here, these are also from International Rectifier. These are IR6721s. RDS on is less impressive on these because these are high side MOSFETs, there it doesn't really count. These are also rated for 60 amps at 25 degrees TKs. And yeah, I couldn't really find anything else. Like, finding datasheets for these was kind of like, I found complete datasheets for the MOSFETs, and just that, well, there wasn't really much written in the first place. So yeah, but the important ones are the low sides, and I found everything I wanted to know about those. One interesting thing about these is also you see those as silver, because these the package is made out of metal and not black plastic like most other cards. So if I go over and get my GTX 470 here, RIP, you can see that the MOSFETs over here have a black package, because that is plastic, or at least some form of it. This is how MOSFETs normally look. If you buy a card today, the MOSFETs are pretty much always going to look like this. Because as far as I know, these kinds of MOSFETs are not being made anymore. But the special thing about these is these are made out of metal because these have an exposed drain. So the metal actually conducts something, because the metal, the casing, is also where the MOSFET is soldered. So if you touch these, you touch the drain of the VRM, which I wouldn't advise. It will also mean that if you put conductive thermal paste on these for cooling, you will short out the VRM. So these are basically, yeah, these are live. The package of this run with live electricity. So yeah, don't touch them. But that's pretty nice, because this gives them extremely good cooling. And the GTX 580 Lightning also has temperature sensors for VRAM and VRM, and VRM never goes over 45 degrees in stress testing, so that is pretty damn cold. So yeah, this vCore VRM and also this VMem VRM is like, this is the most can't remember the word. This is the most extreme VRM impressive VRM that I own. Like, my 2080 Ti has 16 phases for vCore, which is more than the 12 here, but those run in 8-phase mode, not 16, because it's using a UP9512 PWM controller. So yeah, that's only 8 phases, other than this one here. This PWM controller is a UPI semiconductor UP6225, and it is a 12-phase. Now, I think it is a 12-phase because I couldn't find the exact datasheet for this. I could find a datasheet for a UP6208, which is presumably very, very close to this one. And yeah, I'm just gonna assume that these values are more or less the same. And so the datasheet I could find stated that this is capable of running either an 8 or 12 phase mode. So this is running 12 phases, as you can see, because we have 12 vCore phases here. And it is has an adjustable PWM switching frequency from 100 kHz to 1.5 MHz, which is pretty high, like the UP9511, which was used on all the Pascal cards. That could go to 1 MHz, so it's lower. And the new 9512, which is used on the 20 series cards, can go to 2 MHz, which is not a lot higher. To be honest, on 2 MHz, your VRM is gonna melt, no matter how good the Mosfets are, but like 1.5 MHz is already pretty damn impressive. And I think the card is capable of doing that because the Mosfets are so damn good. And if you properly cool them, I think you can go to 1.5 MHz. Then also this over here, the VMM PWM controller, is also from UPI Semiconductor. It is a UP6207, and it is a 3-phase, also with an adjustable switching frequency from 50 kHz to 1 MHz. So yeah, also a pretty nice PWM controller with a nice high switching frequency. Like, it's not just adjustable, it can go up to 1 MHz, which is already pretty high. So yeah, that's a nice PWM controller. And then on the back right here, where I said those could be doublers, for these I couldn't find a datasheet, but I could find a listing where these were sold, and they were described as power management IC chips, not as doublers. So these are probably just drivers, or dual drivers, because we've got 6 of them, so each of them drive 2 phases. So yeah, like having half of the driver chips, then your presumably VRM phases, is usually an indicator that these are doublers. But since this PWM controller is a 12 phase, and since it wouldn't really make sense to double a 6 phase on a card like this, yeah, I'm gonna say it's a 12 phase. That's 99.9%. It's a 12 phase. So yeah, this VRM is completely overkill. This is the single most best VRM that I own. Like, there's just nothing better that I have. Like a Galax Hall of Fame or a EVGA Kingpin card are what this VRM competes with. Even my 2080 Ti, which is the top model from Gigabyte, the Aorus Extreme graphics card, the VRM of that, like, it's using 70 amp smart power stages, running in, technically having 16 phases, but it's running in 8-phase mode. So yeah, like, this one has better MOSFETs. I think, I don't know which RDS on of the 70 amps on my 2080 Ti is, but these are 170 amps. So like, you're never going to run these at 170 amps, but like, technically they could at 25 degrees TKs. And like, you've got a 12 phase. A 12 phase is still better than a big 8, because a big 8 is basically just an 8 with more current handling capability. So yeah, this is better. And yeah, if you put this card on LN2, you can totally surpass 2080 Ti power draw figures. Like, this is a GTX 580, this is Fermi, this is infamous for consuming power and running hot. So this VRM is more than adequate. And yeah, so this is very, very, very impressive, I would say. And yeah, this is a very good VRM. Like, if you want to benchmark how good your VRM is compared to this, or an EVGA Kingpin or Galaxy Hall of Fame card, like, these sorts of VRMs are what overclockers dream of, and I'm really, really happy that I have such a VRM here. Like, even if the card dies, I can still saw off the VRM and use it as an E-power, because, like, it's so damn powerful, you can just use it as an E-power. And I think MSI even had that in mind, because you got this gap right here between the VRM and the VRAM. So maybe they even thought of being able to saw off the VRM. Like, this LDO, that might be the 10 volts gate to source voltage that the Mosfets run on. There's also an LDO over here, which might be 5 volts. Or 1.8 volts, I don't really know. Those probably, like, 1.8 volt would be for the VRAM, 5 volts, don't really know. Don't know. It might be for the Pwm controllers, which would be bad, because I would lose that, obviously, so I have to get the power from elsewhere. But yeah, I'm not gonna take a saw through this card anytime soon, because I'm going to be very careful with it, because this is just the best VRM that I own by far. This is such a good VRM, and it is also such an interesting card. It's like, it's very slow. It's a GTX 580. You can't really do anything with it, but it is just, yeah, the PCB is just insane. I love this PCB, and yeah, this is such a good VRM. This is such a good PCB, and if I remember correctly, Bullseye from actually Hardcore Overclocking also got his hands on this exact card. At least I read a comment of a viewer of his offering to send him his GTX 580 Lightning to him for free, and he accepted. So he may be doing something with it, and if he does something with it, I'm just gonna copy that, because he knows a lot more than me about overclocking. But yeah, this is a very, very good card, and I actually don't know if there's a better one than this, because I think there was a Kingpin, but that one used a blower cooler, and there's only so much you can do with a blower cooler. And I think it also had a reference size PCB, so that this wasn't like, this is a wider PCB. I think it's also a bit longer than reference, so it can't really fit a good VRM on that. So they might just be running an 8-phase like Asus does. And I actually don't know if Galaxy even made a card for this generation. I think they did, but I never saw it. So can't tell how good that is, because, well, I never saw it, if it even exists. But yeah, I love what MSI did here. And I think it's really a shame that today you don't see cards like this anymore, because, like, at least on Nvidia, I don't think if on AMD board partners could still do it. They just don't do it because AMD cards at the moment are just not competitive to the top end that Nvidia has. So it doesn't really make sense to make extreme overclocking cards for AMD. And Nvidia pretty much forbids everything. So I think it's, yeah, unless there is a drastic change in the graphics card market, I think we will never see a PCB like this again, which is really, really sad, because eventually all of those cards are going to die. And yeah, but I do love this VRAM. Like, I want more cards like this. And yeah, so sadly today, like, my 2080 Ti is the best example of this. It's a giant PCB. I think it's even a bit bigger than this one here, or it's about the same. Can't really tell right now. I think it's a bit longer. And also, okay, yeah, it's also taller. It's a bit taller. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, that is a pretty good example. Like, you have enough space to put a very, very good VRM there, and it's Gigabyte's top-end card. They totally would like to put a very, very good VRM there because it's their top-end card. It's their most fastest, their most expensive card that they have. So it would totally make sense to put a killer VRM on that PCB, but you have you have a big 8-phase on there controlled by a UP9512, like on every other 2080 Ti that is not a Kingpin or a Hall of Fame, but those are pretty limited. Those basically don't exist. So just the Kingpin, and it's like, yeah, you could buy basically any 2080 Ti and you would get about the same overclocking apart from Silicon Lottery. Like, the VRM on my Gigabyte card is functionally identical to the ROG Strix, it's identical to the MSI, it's even identical to the MSI Lightning 2080 Ti. It's identical to the EVGA for the Win 2080 Ti. And basically every other 2080 Ti that exists. And there's a small difference that the Founders Editions, which use a 13-phase, but not a big one, just a normal 13-phase. And then the custom PCBs which use custom VRMs are pretty much all big 8 phases with UP9512s. And the one exception is the Kingpin, which I don't actually know which VRM it's using, but like EVGA used 14 phases a lot for their top-end cards, so it's probably a 14-phase. Yeah. But like, if you buy a 2080 Ti Lightning from MSI today, you get a weaker VRM than this, and that's like, why? Like and on 2080 Ti, it's pretty much everyone is using the same Mosfets, even except for ASUS. They use slightly different. Like everyone is using the same 70 amp smart power stage from Fairchild Semiconductor, I think. And yeah, sadly Nvidia doesn't allow anyone to make crazy custom things to their cards anymore, because I think they wanna keep the clocks down on those cards, so they don't get too fast and are too close to the next thing they get out, which is gonna be pretty soon, I think. Like 2080 Ti has been out since 2018. It's not 2 entire years ago, but it's 2020 now, so yeah. On Nvidia time, it's about time for a new generation. So, and yeah, I have my suspicion that the 3080 and 3080 Ti, like the 3080 is probably just gonna be a 2080 Ti, which is a bit faster because they probably just use the Titan RTX core and overclock it a bit. So yeah, and maybe put it to 7 nanometer or 10. I haven't really looked into what Nvidia is doing at the moment. Yeah. So yeah, but let's get back to this card. I really like the VRM. Like this is very, very nice stuff. Like, I've always thought of MSI as like a good brand, but not an exceptional one. But this card changed my mind. Like, MSI is totally capable of doing some awesome stuff. It's just that yeah, the things I used from MSI until I had this card was pretty much like not that exceptional. And yeah, like the extreme stuff that I used from now was pretty much entirely Gigabyte. And then like everyone knows, ASUS does some nice stuff, even though they are quite expensive and they do have some engineering problems sometimes, which can result in weird things. And then everyone knows EVGA, that they also do nice stuff. And then yeah, Galax is also a thing. And yeah, but this is what happens when MSI goes all out, and this is, yeah, I'm impressed. I really like what they did here. And now I'm also gonna do one thing which I wanted to check, which is going to involve these voltage read points here, because I do want to check the resistances with my multimeter. gonna put it here. I want to check core resistance, memory resistance, and PLL resistance, because on the 470, like this thing here, you measured 300 to 500 ohms over these caps here, and then also over this inductor, I think. And I want to check if that is the PLL VRM. And since this card has a voltage read point for PLL, we can just check the resistance and look if it's the same. So PLL is the left one. I'm just gonna check the others too. So I'm gonna check. Can you even see it? Gonna have to. Okay, then I'm gonna have to put it on the left. So you can read that a lot better. So GPU, that's gonna be 700 milliohms, around that. That's more. 2 ohms? Has a full GF110 actually that much more core resistance? Because the 470 has 448 cores, this has 512 and also has support for more memory. Is the core resistance actually that high, or is it just the voltage read point? Okay, that's weird. That's pretty high. So here I measured 64 ohms on the 470, but that one had 1.2 gigabytes. This has 1.5. So this is using more chips, and I'm reading a lower voltage, but that's not voltage resistance. That's within what you would expect. So now let's measure PLL. 280. That's around what I measured on the 470. It's a bit lower, but since we've seen with GPU and possibly also memory, these read points maybe not the best to measure resistance from. So this over here, and then maybe that's probably the voltage regulator for it. That's PLL on this card. So yeah, answer found. So yeah, gonna turn that off again, and my screwdriver fell. There it is. So yeah, can I also just measure here and look if it's the voltage read point or if core resistance on this card is actually that high. So which one was ground? It should be the lower ones, right? Oh, am I wrong here? That doesn't make sense. No, okay. So it's the voltage read point, because this is what I was reading on the 470 for core 2. And for memory, that's actually quite accurate from what the voltage read point did. So yeah, core resistance is weird on the voltage read point here. Yeah, 600 to 700 milliohms is exactly what I saw on the 470 and also the 560 Ti 448. So the voltage read point is weird for measuring core resistance. But yeah, so this video is far too long by now. So both takes have been over 20 minutes, so yeah, this is pretty long. And yeah, so I'm gonna stop rambling now. So yeah, this is the PCB overview of the GTX 580 Lightning from MSI, the most powerful VRM that I own. and a very, very impressive card. So yeah, can't think of anything else to say now. So yeah, thank you for watching, and we're gonna see each other again in the next video. Bye!